So again, my name is Jess Alvarez-Parfrey, and I'm the programs coordinator with Transition US. Y'all are here for the, we have one more in our National Network Strategy Call series here. And this session today will be focused on disaster preparedness and response. And we're taking a look at this, thinking of some scary things. We're talking about compounding crises. We're talking about climate change, housing crisis, racial injustices, a lot of things that can drive us to a place of overwhelm. So the lens we're going to be using is one of an organizer. What can we do to take proactive care of our communities? What can we do to tap into our unique gifts, skills, and talents so that we can come together and meet these challenges head on and design solutions together? I also want to go ahead and just give thanks to the folks who got this work started with Ready Together. We're also kind of kicking off that program today, and we'll have a wonderful guide that I was able to edit and compile resources from folks across our networks. We'll be able to share that with y'all after the conclusion of this session. But I also want to acknowledge Ayako Nagano, who's a Transition US board member, transitioner extraordinaire who contributed significantly to this with her resilience guide and has also been very active in meetings with the EPA talking about how environmental justice is something that we need to be talking about when we're discussing disaster response and preparedness. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Aya, to introduce yourself and just let us know about how you are kind of processing taking action and stepping up for your community in times of disaster.
Oh, good question. And thank you for that introduction. I think, there's two sides of me, one that's freaked out about it and one that's really meticulous about preparing. And, the two sides of me show up like at random points. And I almost feel like, we'll be talking about trauma, but my traumatized state is that I just run away, from the San Francisco Bay Area where the smoke gets bad. And then the organizer part of me is doing the neighborhood, block party planning. So, and I think staying sane is part of the challenge right now. So, thanks for joining the conversation.
Absolutely. And I want to uplift a comment. Thank you for this, John. Some have noted that emergency preparedness is the best entry to crossing political boundaries in the preparation for a transition because it's something everyone can relate to. This is absolutely true. This has been brought up in a number of spaces. So again, this could be a gateway, taking a really challenging, overwhelming, and scary situation, a gateway to really building community resilience and coming together. And I also want to acknowledge, again, folks from Port Townsend who have modeled effective ways of collaborating with local government. I want to acknowledge, again, Bill Sharp, who's one of our network experts on this topic. So we have so much wealth in our network, so much wealth in our communities. And another thing we're going to be talking about on that note is community asset mapping, is knowing what we're working with so that we can be ready to respond, right? And fully tapping into our capacities. And then even further, building that capacity to respond, heal, reimagine, and rebuild the communities we know we all deserve. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen. I have a PowerPoint here. We're looking at this as building community resilience through disaster response and preparedness. And I also want to acknowledge inspiration from Cooperation Humboldt and their work, and a special shout out to Oscar and Sabrina, who have been leading that work in their community. So what we want to do is to go from overwhelm to organized, right? So again, noting that this approach, taking a look at disaster response and preparedness being a gateway, what can we do to get ready? Well, we need inspiration. We need models. We need success stories. We need tools. And we do need a map. So I want to acknowledge something that Marissa brought to our attention earlier, wonderful stories from our network of folks who are taking proactive steps to build resilience. So I would invite you all to go and visit our website to check out those new stories that have been posted. So how do we organize resilient communities? First step is knowing our community. Who is in our community? Where are vulnerabilities? Where is there a lack of distribution resources? Does our city, county, town have a disaster plan in place? Does it have a climate adaptation plan and resilience plan in place? How are folks who are most marginalized and vulnerable in our communities being prioritized or centered in those planning documents? So familiarizing yourself with place, the unique ecology, the history, and the resources of your community is really essential. You also want to build, jumping ahead here. We also want to build our team. So getting started in your own household, right? If you're feeling the call, getting yourself prepared to embark on this journey is really critical. Do you know what your county, again, plan is? Do you feel like you have enough resources available for your household to be resilient? And then the next step is reaching out to neighbors. And this is the approach that's highlighted in our Ready Together program, is looking to those that are closest to you in your community to build a web of safety and support. And at the very least, clear lines of communication, having each other's phone numbers, knowing that you could rely on, call each other up if you needed to get resources back and forth. And again, with the pandemic, we've seen some really beautiful examples of mutual aid, of folks really coming together to fill the gaps. We also want to build our toolkit. So again, we learn on the fly, we learn through experience, but we also want to look at what has already worked. There's a number of communities across the country that are doing really amazing work with climate adaptation, community resilience, and disaster response. I'm lucky, I live in California, and yes, we do have really devastating wildfires, but we also have some really amazing communities that are really coming together and really demanding more from local government in terms of the distribution of resources to folks who can be most affected during these times. I'm going to go ahead and take a pause there and bring it back to you, Aya, and just see if you have any thoughts or reflections you'd like to share on what I've put forward so far, just about building our team and knowing our community.
Yeah, I mean, this is a meeting for organizers, so I'm assuming that we've all had our block parties, but if you haven't, this is just a reminder that, August is National Night Out, and that is a great time to table a information, disaster table where you can share your skill sets and know-hows.
Absolutely. So finding ways to deepen our relationships. This is another point here. So again, do you even know your neighbors? Have you all even talked about what you would do if a disaster were to strike? So doing something like throwing a block party is a great way to start building those connections or reigniting those relationships. And then again, communication channels. So passing around a contact sheet. And this is something that every organizer knows. Anytime you got a group of folks together, get the contact information, know what folks are ready to invest and put into the soup pot, because together our response is going to be so much stronger. And that's how we build resilience. So I'm going to go here and see if this link works. If not, oh yeah. Actually, I'm going to open this one. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a little tour of the Resilient and Ready Together guide. And this has integrated a few different handbooks and toolkits and resources. So it's just a really rich way to get you everything you need to get started and start chewing on, what am I going to do to prepare for a disaster? How can I bring my community into this? So I just want to read this first line here. Our ability to meaningfully respond during times of disaster begins at home with us. Rippling out into the radiating circles of support we create across our neighborhoods and our communities. So again, being ready. Maybe you're the instigator, and sometimes we have to take that on. There's a lot of leaders in this network. So just being ready to, again, bring in your community into the conversation. So I also want to highlight the fact that this guide was designed to be completely interactive with as many useful links and resources as possible. So here we have a way to navigate the guide. When you see this little blue arrow, when you see underlined titles and text, you know that you can click here to go deeper with information. So I set this up as an example here, but we have a wonderful page that we can take a look at. USDA Forest Service on fire adapted communities. And throughout here, you'll find toolkits, you'll find models and case studies to take a look at, especially for folks who are coming from the western part of the country where wildfires are really a huge concern.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we're all just seeing the slide that has the cover image on it. Is that what we're supposed to be seeing?
Oh. Screen sharing. It says my screen sharing is paused. That's weird. Resume share. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Happening there. Okay.
Did you also intend to show the entire thing or just each each slide? There you go. You got it.
You see it? You see it? Okay. Sorry. Okay. So again, this is the cover. How we use this guide. Again, it's a compilation of resources, tools, and handbooks. Again, talking about the power of place, knowing what bioregion you're in, what watershed, what natural disasters do you have to worry about. These are all kind of first steps to get a little bit more grounded, a little bit more oriented, and feel a little less overwhelmed. And again, acknowledging like whether or not your city or community has things like a climate adaptation plan or a robust disaster response plan or department in the county is really important. So beginning here, I want to acknowledge an offering from Jewel Bystrova of the Resilience Network. Resilience. If you click here, and I want to see if we can see it because I can definitely see the links, but I want to make sure it translates through sharing. Can you see this? Cool. Okay. So this document here is a list of different tactics, tips, tools to help you return to center, find something called a touchstone if you're feeling very triggered. I know, for example, that I, after experiencing the Thomas fire in my community, definitely felt that and needed to find ways to heal and reconnect. And luckily enough, I was able to come up here to Northern California with my mother-in-law, and many folks didn't have that luxury of being able to leave their community. So again, wanting to push us to think deeper about disaster response and preparedness and remind us all that it's a lot harder when the system is not supporting you and when your community is marginalized. So again, just wanting to remember that. See if this works again. We're not going to go through the whole guide, but I just wanted to offer again a brief tour, and this will be shared with all of the folks who are participating and throughout our network. So this is kind of the star of the show. This is Ready Together. This was put together in partnership with New Visions and with the office, the City of Renton's Office of Disaster Response and Preparedness and Emergency Management. And so if you click the link here, you have access to the full handbook, which includes a facilitator's guide and different homework activities that you can do with your neighbors and hold each other accountable to really building and flexing this muscle of disaster response and community resilience. This here is Aya's guide, and I want to again take a break and invite you, Aya, to speak a little bit more about what you put together here. It's an amazing resource.
Yeah, happy to do that. There is a Google Doc link, and we can share that if you have access to it, if you could share it.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. So the guide goes through inner resilience and outer resilience, and we just emphasize, the two spheres of resilience that we need to be thinking about, just because the mental is a huge component of facing what is actually overwhelming in many ways. So the outer resilience, covers the basic like preparedness, Red Cross information, what you need, what's the disaster kit you need, how do you prepare your house, how do you prepare your neighborhood, how do you prepare your municipality. There's a couple of, but the inner resilience part I think is worth noting as organizers. There's a moment in time the experts of trauma say. There's a moment in time that we come together after a traumatic event, looking for community and looking to both give and get. And it's a time to step in as an organizer and connect people to a community or purpose, which the trauma experts say leads to hope, inner resilience, and just health in general and balance. And just having that connection to a solution that faces whatever that traumatized you in the first place, is what will bring our mental wellness back. And so, as organizers, when people come looking, that's like an ideal time to say, here, let's connect you to a purposeful activity that is kind of, transition can kind of help broker that connection between the work they can show up for and, what their interests are. So I think it provides, the inner resilience piece provides an opportunity for organizers in a way. It's the silver lining, I guess, in disaster. There's a couple other resources in here. Namely, I want to uplift the importance of neighborhood mapping and organizing at a neighborhood level right now. Resilient Hubs is discussed. It's an up and coming, well, it's pretty well kind of discussed in California, all over the place. People are really starting to fund Resilient Hubs, which is basically any structure in your neighborhood that can host like a charging station, water purification, and just model those resilience practices within your neighborhood block. And we want that all over town. And that's what a Resilient Hub is. And there's a couple other resources. Findhelp.org helps people connect to mental health resources as well as financial assistance. So that's a good one to know. So yeah, take a look if you have time. It's about 20 pages. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have some great resources. And going back to what Aya was saying about Resilient Hubs, thinking about community centers, our food banks, churches, schools, thinking about how we can build a network of relationship and communication between these sites that serve our community so that we can amplify and expand that ability to be resilient and make sure that our communities are kept safe. And even further, this is paving the way for us to build thriving communities. It's not, resilience isn't just about bouncing back to normal. If anything, with the pandemic, I'm reminded that we were offered a portal. This is an opportunity, like Aya said, to kind of seize the silver lining out of something that can be really devastating and really recommit ourselves to, again, building just and equitable and healthy communities. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So again, this is a really awesome guide, and I'm super excited to share that with folks across the network.
Can I say one more thing?
Please do.
Yeah, Cooperation Humboldt, really, there's a great session that Jesse and I and Sabrina from Cooperation, oh, there you are, and Oscar, we're talking about how you organize and catalyze the community, like, oh, you're here, so you can talk about it, like how people kind of were asking, how can we get involved? And you kind of somehow catalyze that into the mutual aid effort that you have in town. Do you want to touch upon that a little, and how, like that taking that energy and that concern that, people have, they come and what can I do? And I heard that you, mobilized a volunteer corps. Oh, there's Oscar. Hi.
Hi, Aya. So I'll take a moment just to share a real life example of what's happening this year. So what's happening this year is people are joining our team, and we are partnered with American Red Cross. And so by registering with American Red Cross, that takes care of liability, as well as gives them access to tools and resources and training that actually helps them be prepared and get them to be confident, right, before fire season. So as we enter fire season, we're not just responding. That response was last year, right? We just were trying to get people into the right place at the right time and connected to what is referred to as event-based volunteer opportunities. This year, we've been hearing people who are registering with us to get that training and be part of ARC and get support from our network, that they've been looking for a way to get involved for years. They've lived in this community for years, and only now is there an outlet for them to sign up, keep themselves accountable, mark something on a calendar, and attend our orientation to be ready to be a fire season volunteer. So really what you should pull out of that is that many communities, they have traditional like fire response agencies, and then they have the traditional supportive agencies, which typically are organizations of faith. But outside of those parameters, there isn't a community centered group where if you're a part of the community, you can sign up to volunteer. It's just absent. And so in our presentation, I wasn't ready to share this with you guys, but we have a Venn diagram of community cooperations, Humboldt disaster response and resilience team, right? We're in a Venn diagram, and then there's here way off to the side is traditional first responders in our community. There's a fat disconnect. And so what we're trying to do is bridge that gap, right? Connect traditional first responders to the community who is wanting to work with community-based organizations such as Cooperation Humboldt to be, to be that force and to be prepared, have boat will travel, or, have bucket will bring my bucket to come help empty out your flooding, I don't know, barn pen or whatever it may be. And so that's just an example of something that isn't existing in our day-to-day status quo, systems, and what we're trying to implement and create, more of a norm culture.
Thank you, Oscar. That was awesome. And it also just brings up this point about creating belonging, a sense of belonging and opportunities for reciprocity in our disaster response and preparedness. Because again, that builds investment, that builds relationship, and studies show that people want to contribute. They don't want to just be on the receiving end. They want pathways and opportunities to really feel like they're a part of something. And then this also connects to how can transitioners be leaders in their communities and connect with local government. Our ability to get the word out, our ability to inspire and engage volunteers, and building a community capacity for response and ability to build is so absolutely needed. And so again, this again is a pathway through disaster response. And again, if we're thinking as organizers, to influence the way that our systems of governance serve our communities by getting more community voices involved, getting more folks recognized for the labor that they're already doing in community. All right, I'm going to go back to our slide really quick. Okay, so right here we have a slide on taking actions. So we have resources, we have different examples of folks doing work successfully in their communities around disaster response and preparedness. So what are these baby steps? And again, assess, like you may be an expert like Bill Sharp, or you may be just getting started on this journey. So just assess, where am I at? What's the most accessible way to, at the very least, get started? We know for a fact the majority of households in this country are not prepared for a disaster. And again, I also invite us to kind of unpack a disaster, and the words of Sabrina Miller ring in my head often about recognizing everyday disasters like homelessness, food insecurity. All of these issues will serve to make our communities more vulnerable if we're not addressing things like basic needs and building a strong enough community safety net. So what can we do to get started on that journey? Baby steps, how to make a mutual aid network. So getting started with getting folks communicate, phone numbers, knowing what they're willing to offer, skills that they may already have. The practice of community asset mapping is a really strong way, and we're going to mention it often because it's just really a powerful way to know where you are and know where you want to go and what you're working with. And then I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about databases like CalAdapt and doing things like vulnerability assessments, and some of the other resources that you have here.
Yeah, so CalAdapt is so I have to apologize. We're both from California, so we do have information specific to California, but it's a model data set that the state has offered, in which you can look up your community's vulnerability down to the zip code, and you can actually see if it's going to flood or what the chances of wildfire are. And we think, and John, I think you can vouch for this, Professor Foran, that it's really important to visualize the disasters that are coming our way, so that people kind of can visualize what they need to prepare for. And so CalAdapt is being uplifted as one of those amazing tools that we do have in this state, and we'd like other states to do similar efforts so that more people are aware of their vulnerabilities. And another one that I could talk about is, I guess, neighborhood mapping, or do you want to take it back?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I think we've touched about neighborhood mapping a couple times, but it's really important for me, at least, to know who has mobility issues in my neighborhood. And I actually called up my fire department to ask, who are those people, but I think they're resource strapped. I could not get that information, or I get a phone call even. And also, who are the doctors, who are the plumbers, in when the houses down the street are burning. I'm going to want to know all of that, plus what Jesse said, which is, how do I call people, check in with it, So the neighborhood mapping seems to keep coming up as an important thing to do. So just wanted to front load that into the conversation.
Yeah. And again, we have a mention here of mental health resources. So again, depending on our experiences, thinking about disasters may be triggering or may bring up different things for us. So just knowing where to find support, and then knowing how to share those resources and support with your communities and your network is really essential. If at the very least you want to be an information share, start there. And then you can move on to really instigating the community organization aspect, which again is really essential for building sustained community resilience. And then we'll have one more slide, and then we're going to move into breakout rooms to engage with a couple questions here. So again, collaborating with local government, we have folks in our network who have been doing some really amazing work. Cooperation Humboldt, we have folks in Port Townsend. So again, visit our Stories to Action page to get more inspiration there. I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about the EPA and the work that you've been doing there.
Yeah, climate resilience, there's a lot of funding for disaster preparedness, and then there's funding coming for climate resilience, and it really seemed like two sides of the same coin. And so I wrote a report, which is encapsulated in the resilience toolkit handout that's there. But it seems like disaster prep, I think, is better done with the mental aspect in mind, as well as the outer. It's the same analysis, so to me it's the same kind of coin. It's two sides of the same coin. So it was a very rich research that I was able to do in terms of how resilience could support disasters. And the biggest one is the Resilience Hub, and that really it's gaining momentum and speed. There's a guide called the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, USDN. They have a resilience guide, and that's really the first, like the beacon in the movement, I would say, of like what that is. So I can put the link in the chat.
And there's a link to that resource as well in the larger Resilient and Ready Together guide. And also, just going off of what I said, there are flows of resources and federal and state level dollars coming into communities. And again, like meeting that gap that Oscar was describing, and being able to organize ourselves and looking at how our community asset maps could even inform certain proposals, finding ways to engage with elected officials, building coalitions with allied community networks and organizations. These are all steps that we can take to be more proactive. But again, we can start with baby steps and just knowing who our neighbors are and having a contact sheet, knowing who needs extra support if they have mobility issues or other medical challenges. Those are small ways to get started. All right, folks. So we are going to move into breakout rooms with groups of, I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, with groups of 4 to 5. But before I do that, it's important to take a breath and to pause. Want to invite any words from Bill Sharp and then Deborah Stinson. Again, just given your expertise and your work already done in community around disaster response and preparedness, just if you have any thoughts to offer before we jump into breakout rooms.
Well, since you mentioned my name, I do have a background in emergency management. I've had a seat in the Arizona Emergency Management Center. I've also been involved with our local emergency management and the oversight committee. So I do have some background in this. And basically what I would like to say is what I've seen of this session so far, you guys are on the right track. You're doing something good. I'm very, very much interested in continuing to support where you're going.
Thank you, Bill. It's really encouraging. And then
And
over
I'd
to
like
you.
to echo that. I'm Deborah Stinson, very much involved with the local 2020 emergency preparedness effort that you'll read about in the news story. So I won't belabor a lot of that, but I will say this work with working, taking care of yourself, taking care of your household, and then taking care of your neighborhood is an approach that's worked really well for us. I'd invite you, I'll put our website in the chat. There's a lot of links to some good information. The Map Your Neighborhood tool that the state of Washington developed actually might give you a head start on doing some of the work that you're trying to accomplish on connecting people. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I really appreciate the interest on the inner preparedness. That's one area where we could probably strengthen what we're doing. We've tried to help doing mental health first aid, if you will. There's that, because anybody that steps up as a neighborhood leader is going to be looked to as a leader, and you're going to have to respond to situations whether you want to or not. So we tried to provide that training to our leaders that step up. But I think before then, you got to take care of yourself. So I'm really interested in reading your work there. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for your words of wisdom. And yeah, again, just the inspiration for getting started on this work in our communities.